You're gonna do a superhero landing. Wait for it. Woo! Superhero landing.
Yo guys, what is up? Max in our first Descendant video, and today we are going over my Ajax build. Now, Ajax is a Descendant that's been requested a whole bunch on this channel. I'm going to be honest with you, it's not a Descendant that I thought I would enjoy very much, but with this setup, we've got his abilities on a 1-second cooldown, and we can do some pretty ridiculous things. We've got his jump just hitting the same amount of AoE as a bunny with high voltage on at base. So he's got tons of AoE, tons of damage, tons of survivability, and it's turned out to be one of my more enjoyable builds that I put together. So I hope you guys enjoy the build guide. Let's get right into it. Before we dive into the video, this is what I customized my Ajax to look like in the paints. They're really dope looking with gold and red, and they kind of look like Hulkbuster / Iron Man vibes. And then this is what it looks like in game. For some reason, I look like Nantucket salmon pink. So yeah, no comments on that down below. I will ban you. All right, let's do this. So the very first thing that we need to talk about is Ajax's skills and how they function. Now, Ajax is one of the few characters with a unique resource. For example, Bunny has a unique resource where she generates electricity, and then a lot of her skills benefit or use her electricity. Ajax has void energy, and all of his skills can give you amounts of void energy, and then the skills get secondary or enhanced effects when you're at max void energy, and we can kind of manipulate that void energy for certain abilities. So to start us off, his one creates a barrier. This barrier is based off of your HP and defense, so scaling more survivability gives the barrier more survivability. Ajax is not affected by duration-based mods, so you don't need to worry about trying to get this up longer. All of his durations are actually pretty solid. For example, this is a 15-second duration, which is really nice, and it also reflects damage back. So if you put this down on Devour AoE Poison Pool, you can reflect some damage back to him. When you use this as an enhanced skill, you get increased reflection damage, and max reflection damage rate is based on your defense. So basically, you're getting 17% more reflection damage if you're using this when you're fully charged with void energy. Next up, we've got Void Walk. Void Walk is a jump ability that has some interesting mechanics that we're going to talk about in a second. But when you jump forward, you're going to stun enemies. When you use it as an enhanced skill, you get the leap enhancement, which when you're doing an enhanced leap, you're going to be getting your shield back. And with the setup that we're going to be rocking, every time that we're doing this Void Walk, it's actually going to be casted as a free skill, meaning it's got 0 cooldown. But this is not only a survivability tool, but a damage tool. And as you can see in our tooltip right now, it's at 17-meter range, which is kind of disgusting. This thing will damage basically everything in its vicinity, which is really, really nice. Next up, we've got Expulsion. Expulsion is Ajax's highest damage skill in terms of dealing damage to adds. It deals damage to enemies and inflicts knockback. When using an enhanced skill, you increase your base damage and range with this. So we're getting extra damage modifier and extra damage range on this. It's pretty significant. Kind of the rotation that I do on Ajax with our setup that we're going to be using in this video is we're void walking around to build up our energy, and then based off of your situation, if you've got an elite or something that's more tanky, you can cast your enhanced expulsion for a big massive hit with lots of radius, or you can just keep jumping around with your Void Walk for even more free jumps. And lastly, his 4 Hypercube. It creates a barrier around you. When you use this as an enhanced skill, you actually get more damage out of it if you're shooting through it. If you put this around an enemy, enemies can shoot through it. Enemies cannot shoot into it. You and your teammates can shoot through it. And building up a ton of range on this thing can actually be kind of bad because if you make it too big, then enemies can walk into it really easily. So if you're just building around the 4, you don't actually want very much range to make this thing quite useful. The other thing to note with his passives is whenever we're getting Void Energy, we're also going to be getting cooldown, which allows Ajax to be a very efficient ability spammer. That is what is going to allow our skills to get down to 1-second cooldowns, is constantly building up his Void Energy for increased cooldowns. Next up, we're going to talk about reactors for Ajax, but before we do that, I just want to mention a weapon for him, which is the Secret Garden. The Secret Garden, whenever you cast Dimension skills, you're going to get a chance to get your custom resource back, which is really awesome on Ajax. And with the pest control, whenever you use tech skills, you get damage for your firearms and skill power. This thing as a stat stick to buff up our abilities would be really nice because when we're using, which we are going to be using, Void Charge, it makes Ajax's 2 and 3 tech and dimension. So constantly spamming these skills, you're going to be getting extra resources back. You're going to be getting extra damage for your weapons and your skills. And I think that would be his god tier weapon to synergize with the build that we're using. Unfortunately, 1, I'm crafting that right now, and 2, I wanted to get this build video out for you guys, and unfortunately for his reactor, which we would go for a non-attribute tech reactor, there isn't a reactor until another day and 2 hours for the Secret Garden, which is the special rounds. So unfortunately, don't have that. But if you wanted to min-max this, I would go for a Secret Garden special rounds reactor, and you could use that as a stat stick. I wouldn't really build into it as a weapon. But I personally, for this setup, because I could farm it, am using an Enduring Legacy mounting. Ajax feels really nice with LMGs, in my opinion, because he can kind of just stand his ground and fire them into crowds. So Enduring Legacy is what I'm using right now. It's getting buffed in a few days, so that's going to be even nicer. And I'm also using it with non-attribute skill power boost ratio and skill cooldown. Skill cooldown is really important. Range is really nice. Boost ratio is really nice. You don't want any crit on Ajax with this setup. So this is a pretty solid reactor for me, and we are going to be, for our first build, the one that I'm focusing on, going to be scaling up his 2 the most. So we're not going to be grabbing Dimension, which the mod that we're going to be using can change it to. Tech for sure on his thing. And that is our reactor. Now let's talk about builds. Now I've got 3 builds to showcase for you. We've got the Bunny Reser build or Bossing build. This is the Unkillable Ajax build. We're going to be pushing 35,000 HP, tons of defenses, tons of shields, and you can just sit in bosses' faces and not die. We've got the mobbing setup and the dungeon setup. Dungeons are going to be a little bit more skill damage. Mobbing's got a little bit more AoE and a little bit more quality of life. But the mobbing setup is my preferred setup for him. I wanted to play Ajax as a skill caster because I thought that would be really fun. I was really surprised at how good Void Charge is. So I want to show you this right now. We are on a 3-second cooldown with Void Charge. As soon as we start leaping around, we're able to just constantly spam this. I'll turn up the volume. So that basically, when you cast it with blue, is free, and we could just spam this basically constantly around hitting enemies. We're using a bunch of conservation so that we're not really using much resource. You can kind of see that with my cooldown, I'm basically regenning the amount of resource that it's costing me to use the skill, and then we get free casts with it with no cooldown. And then obviously if you're killing enemies, you're getting mana back. So you're basically able to just spam this skill and kill everything. It is really, really fun, and it's a massive AoE. Now, there is some tricks to this that make this skill feel infinitely better. The first is if you jump and then almost immediately after jumping, hit Ajax's 2, it'll send you into a much higher leap. So that's the skill jump. This is just clicking it, and this is with the space bar and then immediately hitting it after, which is really nice. You can also chain it from grappling hooking. So let's say I want to hit some enemies over there. I can grappling hook into the air, jump, and then jump again and cover even more ground. And this turns a bit to honestly a really high mobility character because you can do some pretty like funky chains where you jump, go into another jump, go into another jump, and cover some massive distances, all while dealing some crazy damage. Pretty budget setup for mobbing. I just moved my stuff around. This is like the very core things that you'd want. I wouldn't drop any range. I think you want as much range as possible to make him feel really good. You can still fit in MP conversion and nimble fingers for a lot of cooldown, and then HP and some damage. And this is kind of all you need for a budget setup. You technically don't need Void Charge for this, but I prefer it. But even without Void Charge, you're still getting a low cooldown if you didn't want to use a Transcendent module at all. But this would still give you the range, the cooldown, and some survivability to be able to spam around his 2 and make his jump feel really good. Next up, we've got our dungeon build. Now, the reason that the dungeon build differs than the mobbing build is just the fact that the Void Charge skill changes our 3 to Dimension. And obviously, our Reactor is we're mainly going to be rocking is non-attribute tech. So the fact that it changes the scaling on this makes this like hit less damage, and the dungeon setup gives us 2 of these explosions, and these explosions are hitting very hard. You know, they're like more than double the damage of our jump. And so when we want big burst damage, we're going to be using Void Explosion. Note that this still gives us like a ton of cooldown. And damage. We're still using basically all the exact same mods. We're just a little bit more focused on the burst damage of the 2 versus the jump. With the dungeon setup, you're basically just diving into groups, and instead of focusing on the jump damage, you can jump into a group, and then your 3 is going to be your like real big damage that's hitting for like 500,000 damage, and it's also on an incredibly short cooldown, so you can kind of just run around spamming this, you know. Absolutely absurd short cooldown with 500,000 damage that we're spamming. And once again, on the like mobbing, or sorry, the dungeon build, we still have space so that you can fit quality of life in here if you want to use MP collector, so that you can spam more if you want more defense or HP. There's a lot of options that you can use here. Next up, we've got our Bunny Reser build. Obviously a joke. This is our like bossing setup, but we're built as tanky as possible because someone needs to build tanky and keep these damn bunnies alive. But this is a setup that you've got a lot of space on to add to if you wanted to. For example, I don't have these sockets catalyzed at all, so you could catalyze 2 C sockets here and then put them here, and then you'd get a ton of additional capacity, and then you could put extra cooldowns here and even more defense if you wanted to. Would be really nice. But there were some really interesting synergies that we're using here. So the first thing that we're using is body enhancement. This reads that void energy is no longer available through Event Horizon, and it increases our defense and shield proportional to our max HP. So the more HP that we get, the more defense we get. The more HP that we get, the more shields that we get. And then we're using a bunch of HP increases. We've got Stim Accelerant and increased HP. This gives us plus time distribution. This gives us a F ton of HP, which is really nice, right? Because that's going to be increasing our defense and shield. And then we're using overwhelming HP, which adds our match HP by 14% of our max shield, but our max shield is fixed to 1, and then added HP can also be increased by other beneficial effects. We're going to be putting on an increased shield capacity mod, which seems a little silly, but we're feeding a bunch of HP into our shield, and then we're getting a percentage increase of that shield, which is then fed back into our HP. And then, like, for example, if you wanted to get really crazy with this, you could use an Iron Will. Oh, I should technically have that slotted in. But then when our shield is at 0, we get a bunch of extra defense. And because our shield is going to be fixed to 1, it's going to constantly be down. So then we've got Spear and Shield, increased defense, and an Iron Will for tons of defense. And then when we're walking around, for example, let me heal up real quick. We're currently sitting at 34,000 HP for some reason. So if you wanted to build really tanky, we're at like 62,000 defense and 34,000 HP. So you basically just sit in bosses' faces, and then if you wanted some like extra quality of life, you could throw on like a HP collector or some extra cooldown there to kind of round out the setup. For your components, you have a few options. I'm going to be honest, with Ajax, most of the time I just use components that give me the most amount of HP and defense. If you do want to use the set, you could use the Bravery set. The Bravery set gives you increased HP recovery, max shields, and it's got the 4-piece bonus that your skill duration increases based off of your custom resources, which works with Ajax. And whenever you kill an enemy that is stunned, you have a chance to get skill cooldown back. This is, in theory, pretty nice. However, in order to wear 4-piece Bravery, you have to wear 2 pieces of max shield. And in testing with the like jump build that we were using, I didn't notice any difference in our like ability to just spam the jump. One, because it's already on such a short cooldown. And two, I think a lot of the times when you're jumping and one-shotting things, they're not actually counting as stunned. They're just getting tapped by the damage. So I noticed no differences in our ability to spam with the Bravery set on. And so I just don't think it's very important. If you're on like a more budget setup and you don't have the same amount of cooldown that I have, then you could probably get some value out of the Bravery sensor. Or if you don't have as much damage, so things aren't getting one shot and you're killing them after they get stunned, this could be a really nice set, but I just don't think it's all that important. I recommend trying to just get as much HP and defense as you can. Another interesting component option, if you wanted to run it, is the Tomb Vanguard set. Both the Tomb Vanguard top, the sensor, and the processor all roll with defense, and they roll a 2-set bonus for 25% increased defense. The only thing is that these are purple components, so they are going to roll less defense than a legendary component. So I don't know if they're all that worth. Plus, you're going to be giving up a bunch of HP on them anyways, because then you lose like legendary HP rolls. So that is another option. I just don't think it's all that worth. I would prioritize trying to get as much HP and defense on him as possible, and focus on some quality of life things like MP recovery in combat, and max MP so that you can spam your abilities is usually what I'm rocking. So I'll put on something like this annihilation sensor with max MP and MP recovery, and then maybe a like max HP defense thing, annihilation piece here. So now I'm getting tons of quality of life, max MP, MP recovery, and max MP HP and defense. And this puts us at like 28,000 defense and 13,000 HP, which is just super, super cozy. So that's kind of like what I'm aiming for with my components. Guys, that is going to do it for the build video. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what character you would like to see up next for our build guides. I'm currently working on a Eugen build, who actually is pretty sick. I also got to update our Glay and Freyna builds. But yeah, that is it for the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. I'll catch you on the next one. Take care. Peace.